Episode 55 of the Hockey Hub, Sophia and Kasey on the final day of the regular season for the Boston Bruins. Something that we've kind of anticipated for the last, couple of weeks. You know, for some teams, Kasey, they don't know that there's no postseason until the final game, right? Mm-hmm. Like they're playing for that 1 or 2 points. So a little bit of a less dramatic way to end the season. But with that, I think the theme that we've been talking about on the pod, and Adam and Judd and Brick, has been looking ahead to the future. So we're definitely going to be doing that, but I just wanted to acknowledge final game of the regular season, and I hope the Garden is bumping. I know fans have been disappointed, but we got to look ahead to the future and what's in store. And speaking of the future, by the way, I always forget to talk and mention what's coming up. We're going to have Conor Ryan on the show. I know you're kind of new to Boston, Kasey. He's so funny on Twitter. He's really hilarious, has really great insights, but also makes the, following the game on 2 screens really fun. So Conor Ryan's going to join us from Boston.com. We're going to talk about a recent article he had and just some other Bruins stuff. But first, I'm going to pick your brain about it. As I said, we're looking ahead to the future. We know what happened at the trade deadline, and now it's about kind of developing the young talent. I don't know if all of them is going to stay. Could some of them be in a potential trade? Based on your history, and, you had some time with the Tampa Bay Lightning, did you go through, and sorry that I don't know this, but did you go through a bit of a retool or rebuild? What was the experience there covering that and the vibes?
Yeah, we did have an awkward retool moment, about 2 of them. And sometimes, and you've probably seen this, front office doesn't really like to label it as such until they get a solidified plan, that they feel comfortable sharing with the fan base, because hockey is emotional. So in my time with the Tampa Bay Lightning, after they lost the Stanley Cup final to the Colorado Avalanche, it was kind of like, okay, we've got some cap restrictions. We were always in cap restriction issues. And it was time to, break up with a few key leaders in that locker room, and then kind of dip into Syracuse and see what's been taking place there. Now, I will say with the Lightning, they're very big on 2, 3, 4 year development time period for their draftees or their signees, versus having a guy come in straight out of college and getting that opportunity right away. So sometimes the balancing act of when to give a young player that opportunity, when to give him those NHL reps, very much basis on the organization. But I feel like with the way that the game is changing, Sophia, and with the way that young players are kind of getting a louder voice in the NHL and kind of pushing to have those opportunities early, a lot of organizations are going to have to bite the bait and start developing faster and giving those NHL reps a bit quicker. So I think that's the highlight as to where things have taken place since the NHL deadline to this last game for the Boston Bruins. There's names that fans have been chanting since I got to Boston, Lysell being one of them, that they wanted to see them in the call-up mix-up very early and get those opportunities so that a team can figure out, can we build around these guys moving forward?
Yeah, Fabian Lysell getting his first NHL goal, not yesterday, but on Sunday, and then has an NHL point. That's something that you mentioned. Fans were wondering about his development on the smaller side of guys. So I think a lot of the issue, just like let's say Matt Patra, when you have a smaller player, but we know Brad Marchand and, Marty St. Louis going back to Tampa way back in the day, obviously the game has changed and there's a lot of room for smaller, talented players. But when they're first drafted and then called up, size is a big issue. They've got to put on the weight. They've got to be stronger on the boards, puck battles, all these things take a while to develop. So that, could be part of the reason we waited for a while to see them in the NHL. But I think this was a very important stretch for Fabian Lysell, who, I should have looked up his game log, but has I don't have it exactly the number, but he at least got a decent stretch, not 1 up and then sent down, or 2 up and then sent down. He's gotten a decent stretch with the Boston Bruins for him to show them what he could do and for them to see, what they've got. And he's been in the system for a couple of years now. So for him, I feel like this was a very pivotal time. We'll have to see what happens over the summer and in next year's training camp. And then some excitement around someone like Fraser Minten, who came in the trade with Toronto. Yeah, okay, go ahead. If there's anything specific you want to highlight there.
Well, what I was excited about, and I know it was a very sensitive time for Bruins fans considering, but the hype And oh my gosh, I'd love your opinion on this, because stepping into a dynasty market is so hard, and weathering that pressure says so much about a player. But the Toronto market is just so tough. The expectations are high, and Toronto was freaking excited about this guy. I remember reaching out to Danielle Bain and kind of being like, what do we know about Minten? What do we like about him? And she directed me to his highlights when he was with the Blades. And every expectation that jumps off paper for this guy, it starts to translate, and you saw bits and pieces of it in Toronto. And I feel like we've already started to see bits and pieces of it for the Boston Bruins. For one, it's just his presence around the net. And if there was one note that I had when I got to Boston and started to try to catch up on Bruins hockey, it's just like you would have some of these really good finessed plays come about and these opportunities be created, but there wasn't any one net front to polish off the opportunities, or you would just kind of whiff on it. So Minten I'm excited about because he's so calm, he's so composed, and he just has this like cadence and swagger to him, even though he doesn't have this like bolsterous personality. But the way that he is relentless around the net is just something to be so excited about. A guy that can polish things off. He's got a really quick release as well, so he's not overthinking any sort of play, which means he's getting a lot more shots forward. And the way that he collected his first NHL goal, he has done that a number of times in a Blaze uniform. He did that in Toronto, but his lightness on his feet to create those opportunities and the quick release on it. So I just feel like there's so many great things to his game that can be developed, that can be versatile as an addition in a Boston Bruins sweater. So everything I've heard from Toronto, weathering that pressure in Toronto and then coming here, I just think that he's going to be a really cool kid to watch.
Yeah, great point with the net front. And that was, taking me back to the days when Bruce Cassidy was the head coach, and Charlie Coyle was trying to do that. That was a big storyline and big discussion. And like size is obviously important there, and like strength. But great read on Fraser Minten there, and the excitement. And you're right, like he had only had a handful of games in Toronto, but still, that is a market that there is a lot of pressure on you. I had a chance to talk to him in the dressing room. Very polite, sweet, composed kid. And that doesn't always matter when it comes to skill, but it can be a factor if you let the media and the stress and the pressure kind of get to you. It feels like he's kind of prepared for that and is composing himself and sure in himself already. So great read on him there. A couple of other, like Murat Husnudinov, Mason Lohrei, which is funny because he's gotten like a big NHL sample size, but we have to remember that, he was still, as of last year, a prospect, and seeing what he could turn into. Offensively, they wanted, offensive defenseman. Defensively, if you look at his plus minus, definitely work there. But that's something that Brick talks about a lot as the structures of NHL teams change, and this like true stay-at-home defenseman, a true defender, that is fewer and far between. You get a lot of like offensive defensemen now that teams are looking for, carriers and all that. But Brick talks about the defensive aspect of the game really takes a couple years to develop. And I think with him, one of the storylines has been like, do you stifle, and that might not be the right word, but a player's creativity? Do you let them play loose? Because if you kind of beat that out of them early on or punish mistakes early on, it's going to be really hard for them to get that confidence back. Yeah. You kind of wait, you let them have it, then you hope they polish it, and then you really stress the defensive part of the game. But if you have like a confident, creative, puck-moving defenseman that can rack up assists, but also with a great shot, score goals, move up sometimes, that was Jim Montgomery's system, then you've got something that a lot of teams want, and then you polish the defensive side. So I think that's going to be an emphasis for him next season, just to polish that, because he's had a year of creativity, has had a good year, and now, the plus minus and the other stats kind of need a bit of improvement, but it's not something that I feel like is egregious in the sense that it can't be done. It's just I look forward to that growth in his game.
Yeah, you can't be too emotional about the stats. And I think anyone knows that I'm a bit of a statistical nerd, if I can even say it, myself. But I always try to ask players too, like, how much do you care about the eye test versus the statistical test? And that's where Lohrei, I really think, fits that category. I think you put it so perfectly. I think stifling is a good way to put it, because if you stifle his creativity, like, those aren't teachable moments where he's creative in the game. And as the game continues to evolve, those creative points, especially as an offensive defenseman, are going to be useful. It also just depends systematically where this team goes. We know head coaching is another topic of conversation around the Bruins right now as they head into the offseason here shortly. But considering the fact that, like, the way that they need to defend, the gap coverage, it just makes it more difficult. And you have a number of teams in the NHL that are switching to more of a hybrid defense and trying to veer away from, like, man-on-man defense. So all of these changes, you've got to give a little leeway to the game and kind of hyper-focus on what he did well. I love his release when it comes to trying to anchor a play from the blue line. There's been so many times that I think he's come in clutch on that left side, getting things going. So it's just more so positioning and the turnovers that came off of his stick. But I couldn't agree with you more. I wouldn't get hyper emotional around Lohrei. Not to mention is that his role changed so many times this season, because at one point, Hampus Lindholm is in and you've got your lockdown pairings for the Bruins, and then, Lindholm goes out, and then McAvoy has to be the key contributor in that point and that key anchor on the blue line. And then he goes from being a third pairing defenseman, him being Lohrei, to kind of jumping up and alternating on that top pair or that second pair. So finding some stability, I think, will help also bring more consistency to his game. And I feel like we saw some really good things between the Zadorov and Jokiharju pairing. And then considering getting Hampus Lindholm back as well as Charlie McAvoy, like, once these things start to come into play, I feel like we're going to see some really good pointers and, like, useful versatility out of Mason's game.
Yeah, very solid point about the role changing for such a young player who's still finding his groove in the league, and then, like, you're the guy all of a sudden, or whatever, right? And pairings change and role changes and power play and PK and all that. So this was a odd year, to say the least, and I don't want, like, to your point, even with Lysell, we mentioned earlier, this handful of games, we don't know that he's gotten. We don't know what that's going to look like. That didn't start in January. It started in March, and that was already when, I guess, the playoffs weren't officially out of the picture, but, the trade deadline had happened and the writing was kind of on the wall there. So it's this back half of the back half is a good sample size in terms of, like, skill and talent and what you have, but it's not a good sample size to say, like, oh, this is what the lineups are going to look like, or the match or the pairings are going to look like. That's all going to be seen in the beginning of next season and in training camp, which makes me super excited. But you mentioned the coach, so we're going to talk about Joe Sacco and just kind of, like, go in that direction. But first, got to throw in a little promo, got to, like, pump our own product over here. So I just want to remind fans, NESN 360, that's where I watch all the Bruins games, because I travel a lot, go home in the summer. In Toronto, I could log in into NESN 360. So just reminding fans that as the Sox season is gearing up, you can stream the entire Sox season with a NESN 360 annual plan. And Bruins, of course. This is now at an all-new reduced price of just $20 a month paid annually. So that's come down. We've listened to you guys. $20 a month annually for a limited time. You can also get 4 free tickets to Fenway with your purchase. Okay, so remember, you can take it with you on the go, on your phone, iPad, computer, or log in at home. Just visit NESN360.com to sign up today. Okay, back to the show. We mentioned interim head coach Joe Sacco. He actually answered some questions on Monday at practice about, like, how he's going to take in the final game of the season. And we don't know what his future holds. There are several options. Some people might, like, laugh at me and say ridiculous to consider him going back to being an assistant coach if he doesn't get the head coaching job. Some people think that's an impossible position to put him in, or too much pride, or that would be weird. All of a sudden you're the bench boss and now you're not, and you're following someone. That's a them decision if that's where they go. And, he's had a long time here. His kids are grown and have grown up here, and he might want that. I think he probably wants the head coaching job, as anyone does. If he doesn't get it, he might want to stay on, or he might part ways completely. But the head coaching position is going to say a lot about the future. I think we have a clip from Don Sweeney on it, so why don't we throw to that and then we can kind of like dive into it. Yeah.
Donnie, I guess with that in mind, in the bigger picture, when you do name a permanent head coach, what sort of attributes you're going to be looking for next season?
Well, I mean, Joe's done a really good job. It's almost like he's coached two completely different teams within 1 year. And so we're going to go through the process, and he's part of that process, and we're going to find the next guy to lead this group next year and moving forward, and we're going to check off a lot of the criteria. We've had very good coaches in the last years. We haven't gotten it done at the absolute best times, but we've had a lot of success, and this is the first year we've had to take a step back and be honest with what has been underachievement on all of our parts. But we're going to check off the boxes of getting back to being really hard to play against, defensively sound, and we have to find a way to generate more. We've got to fix our power play. So we've got areas we have to address, and it'll start with the coach.
Yeah, I mean, Joe was put in such a crazy position, right? Like assistant coach for a long time, and then firing mid-season or whatever at the beginning of the season, takes over, has a good run, things start to turn around. Then things unfortunately go down with the Bruins. This weird break, 3-week break or whatever it was for the Four Nations. So then that's something you also have to factor in.
Right.
Then friggin' trade deadline, a completely different team. Like he wasn't really dealt the easiest of hands with this. He's done a really good job. Don't know what the Bruins, what direction they want to go in. But any thoughts on just like his short term with the team and what you've seen and, any predictions there?
Well, I agree with you. I think that considering the team that he was handed, there was still some hope and a lot of optimism when he first took over the reins. They were in really low-scoring battles per se. They weren't particularly generating much of an offense at the time, but you saw defense and especially the penalty kill kind of have this revival. So I think that's where fans got super excited, and considering Sacco's career and him being such a strong two-way former player, it felt like it translated. I'll say on my own personal take, and I'm new to Boston, I'll own that, but I feel like his personality and his calmness, I think that it's something that resonates a little bit more in that assistant coach role. So I wouldn't see him having a problem with pivoting back to being an assistant coach, continuing to share his expertise. I think it's great to have a guy that played the game being any sort of coaching role, because you kind of help have that middleman mentality to connect the message. If this team decides to get younger, I feel like that also takes a very particular kind of coach, because as I mentioned beforehand, the vocality of younger players is changing. The expectation of them making an impact earlier is changing, and leadership and a certain kind of, I don't want to say like bolsterous voice, but a certain kind of voice has to speak to that room and unify the dynamic between the veteran presence and the young guys that now have the expectations of carrying a team on their shoulders. So I give Sacco a lot of credit for what he took over, and you can tell how much he loves this organization. He's tried to be as candid as possible when it comes to sharing insight in the locker room through this adverse season that the team has had, but I could see them kind of going for a different guy. And what I'm excited about in the prediction column is there's a couple of head coaches that have made it clear that they're ready for that next step. And by coaches, I mean college coaches that got their programs to the Frozen Four. And so again, with the evolution of hockey, I feel like it'd be really cool to have one of these collegiate coaches kind of step in, have that pride of Boston on their shoulders, and be able to connect the dots between veteran, help speak to the lives of the new leaders and leadership group, as well as the young guys.
Yeah, I love that. I love the collegiate angle there. We've seen just the U.S. hockey scene in college just like absolutely change over the last 10 years exponentially. And then that, and how many of those guys are draft eligible and just like superstars.
And I think that Canadian players are going to be able to come and play in college now. It's going to shift the age group and everything. Like, I'm really excited to see what happens with that.
No, I 100% agree. I'm going to pause you again, though, because we've got one more promo. So pause that thought. But obviously, you make your appearance on this show, too. Boston has entered the chat. And in this podcast, you guys get the biggest trending news in the whole sports world, not just hockey, like on the Hockey Hub. So all the stuff that's happening around Boston, that's hosted by George Belechki, Travis Thomas, and, of course, you, Casey. And that's available on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and wherever you get your podcasts. So Throwing that in there so that we give all the love to all the podcasts we have on the show. Kasey, you and I can continue this conversation this summer because that's when a lot of these decisions are going to be made. For now, final game of the regular season for the Boston Bruins. We've got Conor Ryan coming up on the show, like I mentioned, Boston.com, great writer, great link between the fans and the team, great storyteller. So we'll say goodbye to you, and I'll take it away with Conor. See you next week. I'm very excited to be talking to somebody that makes me LOL without even saying a word, just from his tweets. Conor Ryan of Boston.com and Twitter contributor. Wait, it's called X. I keep forgetting. Whatever we call it these days. X contributor extraordinary. About that. Whatever it is. Do you still call it Twitter? Do you get mixed up like I do?
I still call it Twitter. Like, I don't know when, like, the cutoff is that people are going to start calling it. Like, I'm old-fashioned with that. Its heyday was when it was Twitter, so I'm keeping it that way.
Yeah, I agree. You are the Twitter extraordinaire on Bruins games and, of course, Boston.com contributor. We're going to talk about a recent article you posted. I'm going to jump right into it with something. My reporter observant eyes noticed something, and I would like you to do it again. I'd like you to take a sip of your... There we go. Duncan, which I know, like you, dude, come in every time we go to practice, Warrior, morning skate. I'm not as consistent, as loyal as you, but like there is not a day you don't show up without a Duncan. Am I right?
No, absolutely. I mean, I'm still waiting for the sponsorship to come through if Duncan's listening. But no, all things considered, it's my go-to. I have my old trusty one on the way in Southie that I always go to. There's the Starbucks right next to it, so you do have that, competition a little bit. But I've been Duncan through and through since childhood. So I got to stick with. It's all about the routine these days, right, Sophia?
Just like a hockey player, all about the routine. I have 2 follow-up questions. 1, how many do you have a day? 2, what's your order?
Wow. So over a regular day, I would say probably twice. Like if it's a Bruins game day, 1 in the morning, then I grab one before I go in to the building. Unfortunately, I don't have to deal with it this year, but if it's a playoff run, you're getting into the second, third round, might be a 3 Dunkin' day, depending on how hectic things are. A lot of traveling, stuff like that. Unfortunately, you don't have to deal with it this spring, so don't have any 3 Dunkin' days lined up yet. As for what my go-to order is, always do iced, large cold brew, oat milk, and caramel swirl. Keep it classic. I can't do hot coffee, even if it's a nor'easter, snowstorm, 10 below. Can't do hot coffee. So.
Yeah, that's a thing with a lot of people. I can definitely switch depending on my mood. I think ice is more delicious for whatever reason. But sometimes if I'm feeling it, I'm feeling it. I don't know if you remember this. It was a quick passing through, but we did run into each other in that Southie Dunkin' that you're talking about.
Yes.
And I was like, oh, Conor,
absolutely.
Doing his thing. I think you were on your way to practice. I was not going that day. But anyway, saw it in the shot at 4 p.m. and I'm like, okay, he's really faithful if it's, if it's going strong.
We're locked in.
Locked in. I love, my favorite thing, is why I kind of lead with these questions, is personality pieces and, getting to know someone on a different level. That you do a really good job with that in your stories and kind of like behind the scenes stuff and getting different angles, as well as like a really, great hockey knowledge that you provide. But tell me about, or for the viewers, your style of writing and what piques your interest. Are you someone who comes up with the topics? Do you have an editor that's kind of suggesting things to you? How do you go about getting your story and your storylines before we dive into the one you just put out?
Yeah, I think for me, Sophia, the thing that I try to focus on is it's a long season, right? It's a lot of, if you wanted to just stick to the lineups and stuff like that, there's plenty you can dive into, whether it's a player getting called up or switch the power play, stuff like that, the X's and O's. I love writing about that, but I think you can dive so much further into hockey. And why I love the sport is that you can, let's say it's in a playoff run or a game like that, you can sum up an entire game in a column, or you can break down one play, like one timely block, one timely save, and that can decide a game, a series, a season. And so I think why I love hockey, besides just how great the game is in and of itself and the athletes, everyone involved in it, and I'm very fortunate to tell those stories. I think you can kind of make of it whatever you want to. Like you can dive deep into pregame routines. You can dive into stuff behind the scenes. And I think what I also love about, covering the Bruins and just especially in this market is the ties to the fans. Like, there's been fans who've been going to games for 50 years that their kids and their grandkids are all linked to the same team. They all have the same affinity. And I think you see that tie and that, that link that the Bruins have with their fan base, and being able to tap into that for stories, whether it's the season's going well or one this year where unfortunately they're going to come up short in the race for the playoffs. You can really find those connections and those deep stories that really kind of map out just the deep ties that this team does have with this community and this market. And that's kind of what drew me to a story today about the hat trick hat collection the Bruins have at the Garden.
Yeah, excellent story. And I think you even put it in your article, it's been asked 1,000 times, what happens to the hat? So if you guys as fans don't know or don't remember, go read the article, Boston.com, but Conor's going to talk about it a little bit right now. I learned a lot from it, even though I had to do my own little research. I think we did a small hit, like 15 seconds on Nesson about it, really. So not to the depth that you did it, but great story. Tell us a little bit about what happens with the hats and just kind of what you learned from, because there is a bit of history there. And like you said, the connection to the community, to the fans, and to the staff members on the Bruins that change, that, are for often years with them. And then there was a retirement recently and the tradition passed on. But what did you learn from this article? What happens with these hats when a hat trick happens?
Yeah, so I think it first kind of came together because I think like most, people who watch games, especially during hat tricks, you always wonder what happens to this collection of hats that get piled up on the ice. So most of them, the team takes, they clean them, they end up donating them to, I believe the Bruins donate to the New England Center and Home for Veterans. So a lot of those hats are donated. And then there's usually, for the player who scores the hat trick, there's one hat they get to pick out that they end up keeping. And I always wondered, does David Pastrnak keep these fedoras and everything that he has? What ends up actually happening is, the player who scores the hat trick picks out one hat from the pile and gives it to the athletic training staff and the PT staff. And what they end up doing is they collect them and pretty much put them on display in the team's training room or at TD Garden, so right behind where the dressing room is. And they have them all on display. They have them up on a shelf. So you've got a whole, unique selection. You've got David Pastrnak had a squid hat that he scored earlier this year against the Rangers. That was from a fan from Natick who threw it on the ice. You have Brad Marchand last year had a Santa Claus hat. That was from a game in December 2023 against Columbus. You have the bear suit from last year, which is a popular one, which I don't know if we can consider it a hat, but it is definitely a hat trick trophy. I would say that's on display as well. And so all these hats are collected by the team's athletic training and physical training staff. And yeah, as you said, it goes back since the late 90s. It was the team's former head athletic training member, Don Del Negro. He was there for years and years, and he first started it in the late 90s. More of an informal tradition, but he said that I think it was a Jason Allison hat trick in like 1998 was the first time where, hats are going on the ice and someone threw a fedora and I think it hit the bench. And Don was like, well, might as well keep this as a nice little tradition. So that's where it kind of first started. And, Don retired a few years back, and that tradition is carried on now with Dustin Stuck, who's the head athletic trainer now, who's replaced Don in that role, and Joe Robinson, the head physical therapist. So they're kind of the brains behind the operation now. So at this point, David Pastrnak knows the routine pretty well since he's been scoring a lot of these hat tricks, but he picks a really unique, colorful hat from the pile, gives it to Joe. Joe goes into the room, signs it, commemorates it, puts the date, time of the goals, all that stuff. Player autographs it, and it's put on display. And you've got this really neat collection now of just all these different hats, squid hats, scally caps, fedoras, pink cowboy hats, all on display. And it's cool because it's a fun tradition with the training staff that goes back, almost 30 years now. But also I think it's really cool for fans who, have their cherished trophies or hats that they threw on the ice. It's cool to know that it's not like it's, just been put aside or donated or anything like that. It's part of kind of what the team still has, and it's still in the room, and it's still something that I think is a big part of what the Bruins have moving forward.
Yeah, I loved that insight and how far it goes back. And, players get to keep pucks or sticks or other memorabilia. I like that this involves the training staff that does so much for them, the medical staff and the team. You see that across the league, really. I think hockey players are very humble and team players, and they really shout out, the guys behind the scenes as well. But it's just nice to commemorate that. We just ran video of some of the stuff you shot, the collection, and definitely a good variety. A couple of, like you said, traditional baseball caps in there as well, because why not? Those were the, OG, I guess, hats that were being thrown on the ice, Scally cap, and so on and so forth. But just like a great story in general, and it seemed to, I didn't get to talk to Joe or Dusty about it, Dustin stuff, but it seems to mean a lot to them. Like, they were all smiles in that video. Like, what was your impression when you were chatting with them about it, like, of their excitement level with it?
Yeah, no, they were really excited, and I think it peels back kind of, one, it puts a spotlight on guys that, as you said, have such a key role in terms of getting these guys ready every single game, practice, over the span of a long season. The work that everyone does on the athletic training and the PT staff to get these guys ready is, and they're unsung heroes. And there's a lot of people that are part of that operation for any NHL team. So I think it was really good to put a spotlight on them, show that, this is something that they enjoy doing. It's a good way to, commemorate the players, the games, the fans, get everyone kind of involved. But talking to them, they're really proud about the tradition. They're very happy to talk about Donnie, who obviously left a huge legacy here for all the years that he's been there taking care of these players and, serving as, mentors for guys like Dustin as well. So to get, the spotlight put on Donnie and the tradition that he started, what Dustin and Joe are still doing now. And it's a really rewarding story, right? Because you can show all the inner workings of a team that goes beyond what, I think people look at of just the coaches, the players. There's so many people that are part of this operation with the video team, nutritionists, everyone. We could go on, right, about all the people behind the scenes who do such great, very under-noticed work that, plays a key role into getting the Bruins ready night in and night out. So I think that was rewarding. And it's also just really cool to just show fans too that they're, these things that mean a lot to them, right? Like the kid Ian who threw the squid hat in February, that was his favorite hat, and he didn't hesitate for a second to throw it on the ice. And so for a kid like that who grows up, loves the Bruins, to know that, when these guys are getting ready for a game in the training room and his squid hat's still on display and they see it, I think that just shows it means that you have a closer connection to this team, that, you're kind of almost informally a part of what this team is moving forward. And I think that's something that's really, really neat to show kind of that link that's always there between the Bruins, the people behind the scenes who put all this work in, and also the fans that are obviously such a key part of what makes hockey so great.
Honestly, I loved the video that you found or you got from the family when he threw the hat, and just the reaction of when they picked up the squid hat. And I believe in reading that article, it was a tradition. He would wear it to every game or at, watching every game. So like you said, it was part of his tradition, and no hesitation to kind of throw it, give it away in the hopes that it was picked up. It would probably stink a little. It's it didn't get picked up. Fine. I, contributed, but what a good feeling. And the reaction, that was a really cool video. And exactly what you said, it just as someone who has access to the players, as you do every day, we get to go to practice and morning skate, we get to talk to them. It would still be cool if I don't know, I didn't have to work one day and I threw my hat and Pasta picked it up or something. That would still be cool. But imagine, not having that ability to have that access and that closeness. And like you said, it's a tradition in your family, lifelong Bruins fans. You go to every game. It's just that that little personal connection you get to know that it wasn't just donated, even though the donation is nice that happens, but that it's sitting in that dressing room. That is so, or in the trainer's room. That is so cool. And that video you got of them and the reaction, I just think ties it all together. You had a chance to talk to them too about, how they felt about it, I believe.
Yeah, no, they were very pumped to find out, because I think, as you said, Sophia, it's already cool that Pasta picks it out of the pile. He has it on display And, after the game, they were talking about they were just on their phone trying to see if they got, photos of pasta with it. And like, I believe he showed it afterwards when they have the photo of him with the puck and everything like that. But for Ian, the kid who threw it on the ice, to know that it's something that's kind of immortalized in the training room, that these guys see it all the time. When I was talking to Joe Robinson, the head PT staffer, about just the collection, that guys look at the hats and they're like, no, I'm going to get up there one day. And it's something that now you can look to it. And for a kid like Ian, who's been a fan his whole life, loves going to games, to know that, his hat is there where guys like Pasternak and all these other players are. And it's kind of just part of what the routine is. It's part of what is, the setting in the room as these guys are getting ready. I think that is really, really neat. And it goes back to all these other stories we hear of people who've thrown stuff on the ice. I talked to Jessica Lebrecht from Stoneham. She's the one who actually threw the bear suit on the ice. And, it's the same thing. She's been going to games her whole life. Her family's been going to games. They've been wearing those bear suits for years, essentially. And now she even mentioned, when I caught up with her again for this story, she's like, yeah, I see other people bringing bear suits, bringing fun stuff to the game, getting their kids involved, because not only is it fun to wear those things and get on the Jumbotron, and maybe if you have a hat trick, throw it on the ice, it shows that the Bruins value, the interaction with these fans. And there is those ties that really isn't always there for, the connections between a fan base and the professional sports team. So I thought that was really neat as well.
I agree. As someone who is from out of market originally, from Toronto, and let me tell you, the loyalty there is insane. It's crazy. And Toronto thinks it's the Mecca and all that. I know there's a lot of heat and stuff that they get, but growing up there, it's wild. There's jerseys, first day of the season, it feels like half the city's wearing jerseys. It's really fun. The vibes are fun. And so I didn't expect anything less from a Original Six market and everything I'd heard from Boston. But what really stood out to me coming here, and I'd heard stories about it, is just there's a different level of loyalty, and it's like a connection, like you said. There's a real connection with the fans, and you could tell. And that's not to take away. I don't want this to turn into former Toronto, employee bashing her city. It's not to take away from that. It's just extra special. There's a real special connection with fan base and the team, and whether it's community involvement that we're seeing, building relationships. And even in this example, I don't really have a tangible way of describing it. It was only described to me, and people had said hey, you're going to enter the Boston market and they're either going to love you or hate you, but you'll know either way. And they're very loyal. These people are very loyal. And I just feel that loyalty and that appreciation for each other, mutual appreciation, that, it's we're Original Six NHL team. Yes, we have this market cornered New England, but they don't take that for granted. The players or the organization doesn't, and the fans maybe feel that. And then there's just this loyalty from them too. I'm probably doing a terrible job of explaining it, but I just want to say that, like I said, as an outsider, I feel a difference, and it's hard to put into words.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And even talking to Ian, who's the father, Miles was the son who threw the squid hat. For Ian, who loves going to games and loves bringing Miles and gets excited when Miles, gets on the Jumbotron, stuff like that. He talked about making lasting memories, and what better way to do that than as a Bruins fan to see your hat that is, tied to you, right? It's something that you cherish is now cherished by your favorite sports team, by your athletes that you love watching every single night. That is special. That's not, that's how you make a fan for life, and how you make generations of fans for life, right? And I think that's what really, it feels like it's a small kind of fun little gesture, right? Of a behind the scenes of everyone wants to know what goes into the hat collection or what they do with them. But then when you kind of peel it back, right, as you said, and see just how much it means to people, supporting this team, and how much they think they appreciate the value that the team and these athletes put in, how much love they get from the fans. I think that goes a long way. And it's why it's so deep rooted as to, why these fans are so tied to this team.
Okay, well, you bring up a good point, make fans for life and generationally. Another way to do that is to win a lot when, especially when kids are young and growing up, they don't forget those moments. The Bruins, unfortunately, not in the postseason, calling this a retool. We, believe it or not, have been talking 20 minutes about hats, and I actually had a follow-up, but I'm like, you know what, I'm going to move the conversation along because you have a really good hockey knowledge as well. So kind of just want to get your take on, up to you if you want to, talk about the draft, but I'm super curious about what you think would be a make or break summer for the Bruins as they try to set up for next season. And like I said, they're calling this a retool, which means they're hoping it doesn't take several seasons to get back to playoff hockey. What would be a successful summer for you? Are you anticipating? The Bruins have been very good at, getting the biggest names in free agency or during the trade deadline, as we know. They're really good at attracting those players. Are you expecting big moves again, or them to really focus on developing, what they have and doing it through the draft? Or are some of those picks that they acquired going to be traded? What do you think?
Yeah, it's really fascinating, Sophie, when you look at just kind of the window the Bruins have and the timeline that they're facing, right? Because you could essentially go slow and steady, and you've got what could be a top 5 pick, right, in this draft where you could potentially get your center for the future, and there's a lot of really intriguing players there. So you could draft that player and then wait for guys like Fraser Minten and all these younger players that have really, I think, stood out over this last month or so and have them develop. And that's all well and good, but also you're looking at this team where you have David Pastrnak, who I know the Bruins are where they are in the standings, but you look at what he has done this year production-wise with a team that doesn't have elite power play, doesn't have a strong supporting cast, and it almost adds more urgency, right? Where, yeah, you're trying to retool and you've got all these young assets, and that helps you out. And you're on a good path, I think, where you're able to get a top 5 pick. But you also have to right the ship pretty quickly here because you've got David Pastrnak going into his, age 29 season. He'll turn 28, I believe, later on next month. So he's in the prime of his career now. So you also necessarily can't, push this into a 3-4 year rebuild or anything like that because you want to make the most of what you have right now with guys like Pastrnak and McAvoy and Swayman, who you hope bounces back next year. So it's almost like I feel like what they're going to try to do is a little bit of both, right? If you're able to draft a top 5 center, a guy that you hope ends up being a top 6 stalwart down the road, while also using the cap space that you have, which is about $27-28 million, to maybe add a little bit more scoring punch this offseason and carry you along, get you back to where you were, maybe a year or two ago, maybe not 2 years ago. I don't think they're going to be setting any wins records or anything like that, but at least back in the playoff picture. Whether that's, trying to sign a top free agent, like are they going after a guy like Mitch Marner, which again, you're trying to just find a player that can drive a line. If you're the Bruins and you desperately just need scoring help, if you have David Pastrnak driving one line with, Elias Lindholm and Morgan Geekie, and you're able to add a player like Mitch Marner, who I think can drive a line with just about anyone, and then you're able to down the road, have this top 5 pick ends up being a really good center down the road. You're able to compete right now while also having kind of reinforcements down the road in another 2-3 years as well. So I wouldn't be surprised if they're going after a top free agent, try to get back to at least being in the mix next year. But I think it's also about nailing this top 5 pick and seeing what you can get, because as much as people look at this draft as maybe not the deepest, I think if you have a top 5 selection, you're going to find a player that their skill set lends to being a potential top 6 franchise fixture in due time.
Yeah, I agree, and I love the optimism there. Obviously, we've got to see, can they get the Mitch Marner? Can they sign this and that? Who's going to be the head coach? There's so many unknowns, but that's what makes our job exciting as reporters. And I've said to fans a couple times on my little Instagram stories, like, okay, they didn't make the postseason, that you've had a hell of a run. This happens. That's why I love the NHL. There's parity. Every team kind of goes through these ups and downs. The cap's going up. Like I love that, like in other sports, some teams can be dominant for 40 years. I don't really like that. Like I like the parity and the turnaround, as long as, as a Bruins fan, they don't want it to take 5 years. But okay, you missed the postseason. Now you're really like focused on the future, and this can go so many different ways. Something that Don Sweeney pointed out a couple times in interviews, And he said he wasn't happy with how training camp went. And it really put an emphasis on, he said he felt that, it wasn't that organized. There wasn't obviously there was a contract negotiation happening at the same time. Brad Marchand didn't have his extension. Montgomery didn't have his. There was a lot there that he said, I wasn't happy with how training camp was. And that is something that emphasized to me how really I've always valued it in the preseason, but it puts so much emphasis on the value of a solid training camp to get, the guys, those first 20 games can really make a difference by the end of the season. And I think we can really expect that this year, especially if we're going to have all these young guys fighting for jobs too, like some of the prospects that you mentioned, which just makes it exciting. And there are always jobs on the line. And there's always that internal competition, the term Bruins have been using for a long time. But now it feels like there are a lot of question marks, and that's going to make the competition really exciting to watch. So depending on A, who they sign, B, who the coach is, but then you mentioned this young talent coming up. I feel like the September, October storylines are going to be really exciting and interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And you look at just what has been gained over this last month, right, where you're giving guys like Fabian Lysell an opportunity to play, and he scores his first goal. How much of a lift is it for him that he's able to show that he's been up in the NHL for 10-plus games down the stretch here, was able to score, impact the game, and even I know Joe Sacco mentioned on Monday that he feels like Lysell's gotten better and better with every single game. So he's going into the summer feeling good about where he is. Fraser Minten now is showing that he has NHL reps available, and he feels good about where he is. You've got guys who be fighting for fourth-line spots like Riley Duran or John Farinacci who are getting their feet wet up here and going into the summer feeling like, hey, there's an opportunity for me next year if I train really hard this offseason. Who knows what happens once we get to September and October. And I think it even carries over into the guys who are at the top of your lineup, right? You look at how this past year's training camp was, Elias Lindholm has a lot of pressure on him going into the year, then gets hurt, really doesn't have a lot of time to get up to speed, has all the pressure on him to be the next Bergeron or the Bergeron light they expected him to be, and it didn't work that way. And you're seeing now that he's finding some chemistry with David Pastrnak and Morgan Geekie, and hey, maybe that carries over into next year. He doesn't have to be Patrice Bergeron, but he can just be Elias Lindholm. And if he has chemistry with Pastrnak, he can be a more than serviceable top six centerman next year. So you look at what those guys dealt with this past year. Obviously, Jeremy Swayman, a clean slate, for him. There's a lot of guys that you look at this year, and if you're trying to find, I think, some optimism of, this season, how things kind of went off the rails, it's that NHL teams can kind of turn the page pretty quickly. You look at where the Washington Capitals were 2 years ago. People thought that team was going to be in the lottery for 5+ years, right? They had their Ovechkin window, and then they're going to, the bill was about to come due. Look where they are now. And they're probably going to be pretty competitive for the next couple of years. You're hoping that if the Bruins can follow a same game plan where their franchise stalwarts can kind of turn the page, have a clean slate, execute, and then the front office is able to make smart free agent signings, make good hockey trades that, bring in new talent, that they're on the same path. At least that's what you hope for going into 25-26.
I love the Washington example. Obviously, every team would love their turnaround to be as quick as that, and then where they are now. Listen, sad news. I have to wrap the show because I could talk to you for way longer. Please come back as a guest because love your insight, love your stories. But yeah, I mean, I'm a chatty person in general, but we can't go longer than an hour. So I got to wrap the show, Conor, but thank you for being on. One maybe final question, really quick, if you can give it to me, and then I'll wrap the show. Do you have a favorite article that you read so fans can go dig it up, or that you wrote, that fans can go dig it up? I know it's like picking a favorite baby, but one that you'd recommend outside of this hat trick one.
Yeah, I think another one that I really had a lot of fun with last year that you can still read is about Jacob Lauko, who's, if anyone is able to meet him, is a great interview in and of himself. He will talk about anything. Does not have to be hockey. It could be about The Lord of the Rings could be about Marvel, could be about anything. He will talk your ear off. And I did a story last year about his tattoos, which are all about Lord of the Rings and a whole bunch of really unique stuff. And that was, I think, a really fun one just to talk about his interests, but also why he has these tattoos. And, you look at maybe at first glance, it's like, all right, this guy just likes Lord of the Rings. That's neat. But he has a little bit of a deeper story as well about, what these tattoos mean to him and how he carries himself as a player, how he wants to impact the game. And I think it's a good kind of canvas, I think, to map out how he operates as a player. So if you have time, definitely read that one because he's a very interesting player to write about. He's a lot of fun to talk to as well.
He is. I really like him. I really like him as a person and personality. I think that's pinned on your Twitter. We're going to call it Twitter still. I think that story's pinned. So, guys, check it out. Connor, thanks for your insight and for the work you do because you're one of the reasons that, Bruins fans and the team, they have that community connection we talk about. You kind of make that more visible. You do great work. Thank you for being on the show. Kasey as well, for everyone joining us. This is The Wrap. We'll see you next week.